Great. Thank you again for joining us, Darren. I mean, it was still quite a defiant speech, as you mentioned earlier. She's still defending her record in relation to low taxes and pro-growth. And some people may say that she was intuitively right about the orthodoxy needing challenge, but maybe her approach wasn't the one that people wanted.
Yeah, it's definitely defiant, and there's no doubt about that. When she talked about the policies, she essentially tried to enact the political philosophy, as you say, behind those policies. It was almost Johnson-esque, I would suggest, in the sense that, you know, there was no apology. There was no sense of, I'm going to admit I got things wrong here. I mean, there was even quoting that Roman philosopher talking about how it's not just because things are difficult that we do not dare, it's because we do not dare that they are difficult. But I think, frankly, there'll be a lot of people watching that speech, given what has happened over the last, 4 or 5 weeks or so, with the fall in sterling, the rise in mortgage rates, the real political and economic instability, thinking, well, frankly, I'm sorry, Liz Truss, you're going to have to own up, admit and apologise for those mistakes. But you're right, there was just no sense of that at all in the speech. If anything, there was a reiteration that she felt she was right. Even at the end, she didn't get to go much further in her role as Prime Minister, and almost a challenge, I would suggest, to Rishi Sunak, saying that those conservative values of low taxation and individual freedom need to be held to, knowing full well that actually he is in a tricky corner and may not be able to do either of those things, not least of all because of the mess, frankly, she has left the incoming Prime Minister. So really fascinating. She did touch upon what she viewed as her successes, limited as they were, in managing, of course, the tragic death of the Queen, into the funeral arrangements, and the government's role in that, and also the intervention when it came to the energy price freeze, though that intervention, the initial one of 2 years, was part of the reason we got into trouble in the first place. So a very defiant speech, one that didn't recognise that she'd made any mistakes. One, though, with her family watching behind her husband and her 2 daughters, and a sense that she is going to return to the backbenches and potentially carry on as an MP, because frankly at the moment, stood here, and you guys were talking about it just now, weren't you, the speculation about who might be in and out of the cabinet under Rishi Sunak. I cannot see Liz Truss being offered a job, if I'm honest. I'm not entirely sure she would accept one either, but I'm not entirely clear about what her role in politics may well be. Is there a comeback for Liz Truss? I don't know. Is she prepared to sit on the backbenches like Theresa May, particularly after such a short tenure? We're going to have to wait and see. But she, I think, should be about wrapping up, you would have thought, with His Majesty the King. She will go back to life, not like she's seen it before, because she has been a cabinet minister for a very long period of time, so she will return to the backbench. She's not been there for years and years and years. We'll see what political course she tracks for herself in the weeks and months to come, and we here in Downing Street await, of course, the arrival of the incoming Prime Minister, an historic moment for Britain. We're expecting to hear from Rishi Sunak in over just 30 minutes time or so.
Yes, really, really interesting to think that, of course, Liz Truss has been in cabinet since the time of David Cameron, since the time of actually the coalition government. Really extraordinary tenure there, coming to an end likely today. It was interesting listening to her words, though. It sounded not only defiant, but it sounded as if this is someone who still has a fight to participate in, that she will be an active backbencher. I can imagine her potentially taking up a role as a president of a think tank or something, and popping up with ideas on economic policy and being really active in terms of pushing forward that low tax, high growth agenda. I should just say now, I'm hearing that Liz Truss has officially submitted her resignation to His Majesty the King. She is, as of this moment, no longer Prime Minister. Darren, potentially an active backbencher life now awaits.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in these very brief moments we have, we remember this, don't we? We get used to these kind of protocols that technically at the moment, I mean, the King really is in charge of the country, though it is only for those brief moments while Rishi Sunak takes over in, as you say, the next 5 minutes or so. Yes, in terms of what I think Liz Truss, there were 2 really interesting things in the speech where I think she might be a thorn in the side, if you like, a voice who is going to continue to propagate that political ideology of hers about substantial supply-side reforms and lower taxation to spur growth, first of all, was in that political philosophy that she very forcefully put forward. But second of all, on Ukraine, she was quite defiant that Ukraine needs to win and that we need to continue to support Ukraine with defence spending in the months and years to come. And of course, there is a big discussion, isn't there, whether Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister, is going to commit himself to that 3% of GDP of defence spending by the end of the decade. It's going to be 2.5% by 2026. There are loads of suggestions, given the state of the economic situation in the country, about whether the government can frankly afford that. She was making clear the country should be committed to that defence spending. So yes, I suspect that she will continue to be quite vocal from the backbenchers, potentially a thorn in the side of the new incoming Prime Minister. Also interesting that she did leave with the remark that there are brighter days ahead for the country. And frankly, there'll be many of our critics thinking, yes, there will be, given the fact that you're leaving Downing Street. I'm not entirely sure it was wise to use those words, given the fact that, there will be relief among many, it must be said, many voters, but also Conservative MPs, that she is leaving Downing Street today. We must not forget that. She is leaving because she's been essentially booted out of the office as one of the most unpopular Prime Ministers this country has ever had, and the shortest Prime Minister this country has ever had.